मैं कदे हज पे गया ना तो फिर मेरी दाढ़ी रखनी पड़ती, isn't it? That's what happens. Or if I go for Hajj, then I have to be religious. And so I do want to go for Hajj, I do have the money, but then I'll have to pray 5 times a day, and so this happens to people. Now imagine that, but at a macro level, where you have people that deep down inside, they know that all of this couldn't have come. They do it. They won't say it in these words, but when they walk out and they see a beautiful butterfly, and they see nature, and they see love, they feel love from their family members, and they look at their children and I can't imagine loving somebody like this, and that divine spark within human consciousness, when they experience it, they know, and they say internally, رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا. My Lord, our Lord, you didn't create this in vain. There's a purpose to this. But I can't say that out loud. Because if I say that out loud, wo namaz bhi padhni paisi, tahajjud bhi karna paisi, and I'll have to seek. And I don't want to seek. I don't want to know what I may have to do or not do. I like my life the way it is. I don't want to shake it up about. That's the real problem. So for most people, they don't have a problem with the belief in God. They have a problem in obeying God. It's Islam. And this, by the way, is the epitome of kufr. Who's the greatest kafir of them all? The greatest kafir of them all. What a title, what a naseeb. Bichara. What a naseeb. The greatest kafir of all kuffar is Iblis. Aba wastakbara wa kana min al-kafirin. He is the one that turned away and became arrogant. Wa kana min al-kafirin. And he became of the disbelievers. The ashaddu kufran is Iblis. Did Iblis not believe in God? Absolutely, Iblis believed in God. Iblis was there in Jannah, wasn't he? وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. I'm going to place on this earth a Khalifa to the angels. And they said, قَالُوا أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. Are you going to put in the earth a Khalifa whilst we do your tasbih, we do your hamd, and you're going to put this human which is going to create fasad and widespread of murder in the land? Ya Rabbi, is this what you're going to do? And what does Allah say? Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun. I know what you don't know. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا ثُمَّ عَرَضَهُمْ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ. Allah taught him the names of everything, and then He told him to go to the angels, and He asked the angels questions. The angels had no knowledge of this, and when they realized that they had no knowledge, what did they say? Subhanaka, what's the verse? Naam. Can someone recite it from the beginning? أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك قال إني أعلم ما لا تعلمون وعلم آدم الأسماء كلها ثم عرضهم على الملائكة فقال أنبئوني بأسماء هؤلاء إن كنتم صادقين قالوا سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. They said, glory be to you. We have no knowledge save what you have given us. So the greatest kafir of them all. Well, welcome, Shaykh. أهلا وسهلا. تفضل مشكورا سيدي.
I'm going to sit on the floor. That's okay. Continue.
I'm just going to wrap up the. Bismillah. سيدي. تفضل سيدي. سيدي. I mean, is you the whole majlis? The whole majlis? Bismillah. So I'll just wrap up, introduce Shaykh Walead, and I'll hand it over to him, inshallah ta'ala. So setting that tone that Shaitan, who believed, was a theophobe, and that's the reality. His fear was not in the belief of God, but his fear was in the submission to that reality that he could not hide from. And that is the nature of man. That when we're trying to figure out the cognitive dissonance that exists within the modern man, it's that They can't really do away with the glorious civilizations that man have produced, namely those uh, that have been rooted in deep spiritual traditions. They can't deny that. They can't. رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا seeps out at every moment. But the fear is if I accept it, then I will have to obey, and I can't do that. And that's the problem. And so for us, when we're trying to understand navigating the world as Muslims in general, I mean, it's so easy to say in our times and their times. I mean, all times are difficult. There's never been a time in human civilization except that it's been difficult. Was it any easier when the armies of the Mongols were coming through Bukhara and Samarkand? Was it easier? Really? Was that time easier? Was it easier when we saw the collapse of one of the greatest Muslim empires that the world had ever seen? Was that really easier? With these we're generally speaking here, are people that are a community of people whose ancestors were colonized, whose languages were taken away, whose cultures were destroyed and disrupted, whose lands were pillaged. Is our time really that much more difficult than their time? They didn't have to figure stuff out. They had to figure it out. But if there's one thing, the challenge, as I say, that we sometimes face in this period is that cognitive dissonance. When you have drunk in through the very nature of living in that type of world, that its building blocks for the last few hundred years have been rooted in a deep secularization, when that has been your first drink through television, through common culture, through music, through your schooling, your education, that's your first drink. And the first ilqa, it's like if you've ever had, if somebody was to grow up supporting a football team, sorry for the poor example, how many people in life change their football team? Really? They can stop supporting the football team, right? But they don't change it. Because your first ilqa, that first transmission into you. When somebody normally takes a shaykh, for a better example, how often did they change that? Who was the first person that did ilqa of la ilaha illallah into my heart? What sort of surrounding was I in? What sort of community did I come from? Are you with me? I know there's a lot of movement around. The first drink is the most difficult to get rid of. And so if that drink is a drink that is from other than the hawd of the Prophet ﷺ, then whenever you're trying to take a different drink in, there's a problem. And that's the cognitive dissonance that we're facing. And as a Muslim, one of the most difficult challenges for us today, if we're going to talk about, because we have life a lot more easier than many people in the past, but the greatest challenge is to unchain ourselves of as much as what we know, and to be able to drink a fresh drink as much as possible from the hawd of the Prophet ﷺ. And one of the ways that we do that is by suhbah with the mashayikh of our tradition. And we're very fortunate to have Shaykh Walead, Mosaad with us here today. The reason why I say that is because we talked about this yesterday in the hadith, in the dars of hadith, about the concept of the sanad. The concept of the sanad. And our as-salaf, they would say, لَوْلَا الْإِسْلَادِ لَقَالَ مَنْ شَاءَ مَا شَاءَ. That if it wasn't for the great transmission, then somebody could say what they want. And this is another problem that you have, where if you follow people on social media, etc., you don't really necessarily know the isnad that they have. But when we do have mashayikh, and mashayikh like Shaykh Walead, as I mentioned, then it comes with a transmission. It's not just the teacher that sat in front of you, but it's the teacher's teachers that are sat before you, and the teacher's teachers that are sat before you, until the hope is that transmission, bisanadin muttasil, mubarak, unbroken, back to the Prophet ﷺ, that you can hope that what I am taking is a fayd, is a direct pouring of grace from the Prophet ﷺ. And we make that intention, inshaAllah ta'ala. Very quickly, Dr. Walead is the chair and scholar in residence of Sabil community. I'm not sure how updated this biography is, but I'm sure the gist of it will be correct. Additionally, he is the director of Muslim student life at Lay University.
No.
هذا خطأ.
Former.
Sorry?
Former director.
Former, okay. طيب. I think I'll just move straight down to. He completed his degrees from Rutgers University, Fatih Islamic Seminary in Damascus, Al Azhar University in Cairo, the University of Liverpool, and has a PhD in Arab and Islamic Studies from the University of Exeter in the UK. And that's quite a wonderful resume, mashallah ta'ala, bringing together both the traditional training from Islamic seminaries and mashayikh, and also the Western Academy also. So that jama' between those two traditions is a beautiful thing, and we also know that the Shaykh has been lecturing for a long time, both in America, the UK, and Canada, and around the world, and even in Istanbul, Turkey, mashallah ta'ala. So again, we're very fortunate. Aylesbury is a community that always honors its guests, and so we're very fortunate. Ahlan wa sahlan bikum. To Shaykh Walead and the guests that he brought with him today as well, inshallah ta'ala. The format for this is that the Shaykh's going to give a talk, after which, inshallah ta'ala, we'll open up to a more of a discussion and have more of a conversation, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Also, ahlan wa sahlan to the Wickhamites that have joined us here today as well, mashallah ta'ala. So to everyone that came out, ahlan wa sahlan bikum, inshallah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وأنعم على سيدنا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا قائد ذر المحجلين وشفيع المذنبين سيد الأولين والآخرين
اللهم صل على
سيدنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه. So I'm very, very appreciative and honored to be invited to speak in this beautiful masjid, with this beautiful community, and by Sidi Saud Bey, who we've known of for a long time, but we didn't have the opportunity to actually meet, I think, less than a decade ago. And also on the specific occasion that you also have a new Imam, Imam Shams. Pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him barakah and tawfiq, and makes his tongue pure and inviting to the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the topic that I think that was advertised was about raising the youth or dealing with the youth or modern challenges. And as I walked into the masjid today, I noticed that the name of the mosque was very something Al-Ghawthiyya, right? And that's interesting because Al-Ghawth is a name or a description that in later kind of Islamic eras was attached to Rijalillah, to the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I say Rijal, I mean Rijal as a maqam, not as a gender. So when we say Rijalillah, the men of Allah, it means the men and women of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because women can have the maqam of Rujula, right? It means the attributes of what it means to really be a person of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of the responsibility and the mercy, the compassion, the love, and the protection over the ummah. And many of our women are like that. Many of our mothers are like that.
Subhanallah.
And as one of my teachers taught me, the raham, the womb of the mother, is the factory of the awliya. Because men come out of wombs. So if we're not for that environment, then we would have no awliya. We wouldn't have anybody. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose that to be the first life that everybody goes through, the life in the womb. And He named that womb and took it and derived it from one of His names. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, هو الرحمن وهو الرحيم. So the Rahim is mushtaq min ismihi al-Rahman. So the womb takes the name, the attribute from the Rahman. So it is the place of mercy and compassion and love. Similarly, when we talk about Al-Ghawth, so we said it's the name of the Rijalillah, the men or the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Al-Ghawth or Al-Ghiyath in Arabic language means the rain that is plentiful. The rain that wherever it falls, wherever it comes down, brings good,
Allah.
brings life, brings mercy, brings compassion. Ya Mughithu, Aghithna. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala huwa al-Mughith. He is the one ultimately that sends down the rain, and He sends it down in many ways. So physical rain is one way. And another way is through His ambassadors and His messengers and the followers of those ambassadors and messengers. And amongst them would be those who would be called Al-Ghawth. This has been used for some of the great Rijal of the Ummah like Sidi Abu Madian Al-Ghawth, Sidi Abdul Qadir Jilani Al-Ghawth. And they were given this honor by the Ummah, by the community, because they were like the rain. Wherever they went, wherever they found themselves, they brought good, they brought mercy, they brought compassion, they brought life. And this has been the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala since the very beginning, since the time of Adam alayhi salam, all the way until our time, and culminated in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We have the verse written up there. يا أيها النبي إنا أرسلناك شاهدا ومبشرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا. O Prophet, we have sent you as a shahid, as a witness, ومبشر, and one who brings the glad tidings, the good news, the cause for optimism. وَنَذِيرًا, and also the forewarner, the one who cautions you, so as you may not fall into error and may not fall into mistakes. وَدَاعِيًا إِلَى اللَّهِ, وَدَاعِيًا إِلَى اللَّهِ, and the one who invites to Allah. Didn't say داعيا إلى الإسلام, ولا داعيا إلى الإيمان, ولا داعيا إلى أهل السنة, ولا داعيا إلى مذهب أبي حنيفة. Didn't say any of those things. أو الأحكام أو الصلاة أو الزكاة. None of those things. داعيا إلى الله. He invites to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because ultimately that's who we're inviting to. We're not inviting to anybody else. The great Imam Sayyidi Abu Hassan al-Shadili, sometimes also referred to as a Ghawth, he said, من دلك على الدنيا فقد أتعبك قد غشك. Whoever indicates the dunya, who guides you to dunya, they have cheated you. They have deceived you. وَمَنْ دَلَّكَ عَلَى الْعَمَلِ فَقَدْ أَتْعَبَكَ. And whoever merely or solely invites you to al-amal, do these extra prayers, do these extra fasts, do these extra things, فَقَدْ أَتْعَبَكَ. They've tired you out because they haven't shown you the ultimate goal. وَمَنْ دَلَّكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَقَدْ نَصَحَكَ. But whoever invites you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has truly given you counsel, has truly advised you in the best way. For Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, هو داعٍ إلى الله. Subhanallah, he said, بِإِذْنِهِ, by his permission. Do I need permission to invite to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Absolutely. Absolutely. Would you invite someone to your father's house without asking your father first? Do you invite your friends over to your father's house besides saying, oh, can I bring someone over to the house? Or asking your mother? You just bring your friends over without asking them? Is that proper etiquette? No. So how is the Prophet ﷺ da'in Allah bi'idhnihi? Well, it says on the beginning of the verse, Inna arsalnaka. Inna arsalnaka. We, yani Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has sent you. He has sent you. That is the idhn. That is the permission. So that when the Prophet ﷺ speaks, he's not speaking on his own. وَمَا كَانَ يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. Right? He doesn't speak of his own volition, he doesn't speak on his own. إِنَّهُ وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. But it is revelation that has been revealed to him. Right? It's revelation that was revealed. He doesn't speak on his own. That means he has permission. He has the permission. But he's not just inviting. His tongue is not just the inviter. The rest of the verse says that. وَدَاعٍ اللَّهِ بِإِذْنِهِ وَسِرَاجًا مُنِيرًا. Do you know what the siraj is? Back when, before we didn't have electricity, and we didn't have artificial light, people had to do by the light of day, but sometimes they had to do things at night. So the siraj was something that would be burned, like a kerosene lamp. And when you have it inside the glass, and it's lighting up inside, everything would be illuminated around it. So it's a metaphor. So the siraj is providing the light. وَدَاعٍ اللَّهِ بِإِذْنِهِ وَسِرَاجًا مُنِيرًا. هو الذي جعل الشمس سراجا والقمر نورا. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala call the shams, the sun, a siraj, and He called the moon light? Where does the light of the moon come from? Where does the light of the moon come from? You. Glasses. Yes. What's your name? Farhan. That's a good name. Farhan means to be happy. Right? You gotta smile. Where do you think the light of the moon comes from? When you look at the moon in the sky, where did that light come from? The sun. Very good. What's your name? MashaAllah. That is the right answer. So the shams is the siraj because it illuminates everything. It gives light to everything. وَنُورُ الْقَمَرِ مُسْتَفَادٌ مِنْ نُورِ الشَّمْسِ. And the light of the moon comes from the light of the sun. The light of the moon comes from the light of the sun. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls the Prophet Sirajan Munira, so the Munir is the one who gives light to other things. The Munir, الذي أنار غيره, the one who gives light. Is that right, Shams? No. Is that right? The one who gives light, studied many years in this temple, he knows it. The one who gives light to other things. So how is the Prophet ﷺ إِذَنْ سِرَاجًا مُنِيرًا? So it's not just by his speech. It was also his deeds. But not just by his deeds. Think about how light permeates from something that gives light. Somehow it's all over the place, but you can't see it. But you know it's there by the effect. Right? You can't see the rays of light, but you see the effect of the light. The ahwal of the Prophet ﷺ, his character, his inner state. Wallahi, wallahi, wallahi. We are still benefiting today, as we speak, even in this masjid, from his inner state.
Allah.
There's no question about that. We would not be who we are if we didn't benefit in that way. How could it be any other way?
Allah.
How could it be any other way? With our Prophet
Sallallahu alayhi.
He is the Nur.
Sallallahu alayhi.
He is the Bayyina.
Sallallahu alayhi.
He is the Rasul.
Sallallahu alayhi.
He is the Mustafa. He is the Mujtaba.
Muhammad.
Many, many names of the Prophet Muhammad
Sallallahu alayhi.
similar to the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in number. We don't even know all of them. So, if Allah is continuing to enlighten us, how does that work exactly? By reading the text, the hadith? True. The seerah? Yes. Good. But there's many people who read the hadith, and many people who read the seerah, and many people who read the Quran, but the light of Muhammad doesn't shine upon them. Right? Why is that? Because the light of Muhammad shines via the heirs of Muhammad, the ones who inherited from him. He said, نحن معشر الأنبياء لا نورث دينارا ولا درهما. We, all of the prophets, we don't bequeath. We don't have an estate and we leave behind gold and silver. What do they leave behind? Al-ilm. Knowledge. What type of knowledge? The most important type of knowledge. The essential knowledge. The one you can't do without. The one, if you don't have it, you're not knowledgeable. Knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a certain type of knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that can only come from the heirs of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Only from the inheritors of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Only from people we call al-ghawth wal-qud.
Ya Rab.
Wal-nujaba wal-nudaba. Wal-abdal. Wal-atqiya. Wal-awliya. Wal-muhsinun. Wal-mu'minun. Wal-salihun. How many different names does the Quran mention about people who are good? Right? The Quran could have sufficed and just said, Al-Mu'minun, Al-Muslimun. La, Rahmatullahi qareebun min Al-Muhsineen. The verse didn't say the Rahmah, the mercy of Allah is close to someone else. Qareebun min Al-Muhsineen. And it talked about the Quran, Hudan, Liman, Lil-Mu'mineen. Oh, in one verse, what about the other one? Lil-Muttaqeen. Hudan lil-Muttaqeen, those of taqwa. So these are different things. Otherwise, we would say, what's the difference between al-muttaqi wal-mu'min wal-muhsin? No, they have differences. Allah could have used the same word. And these are layers upon layers, and light upon light that come from the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ said in a very emphatic hadith, "At-taqwa ha-huna." Taqwa ha-huna. And he pointed to his heart. Some can interpret that as the taqwa is in your heart.
Allah.
But that's not the obvious answer to me. The taqwa ha-huna, yani from the heart of the Prophet ﷺ himself is where taqwa comes from. You want to be a muttaqi? Follow Muhammad ﷺ. Some of the Sahaba tried to do it on their own. 3 of them. They said, we'll never measure up to be like the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Let's do the taqwa. Let's figure it out on our own. We'll do better. So one of them said, I will never sleep. And I'll pray Qiyam al-Layl, Tahajjud all night. I'm taking no sleep. Another one said, I will fast every day without breaking my fast. Another one said, I will never marry. I will always be celibate and just worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ heard about this and he summoned them. He said, Ana asum uftur. I fast and I break my fast. Ana usalli wa unam. I pray and I sleep. Wa ana azawaj nisa. And I also marry women. وَأَنَا أَتْقَاكُمْ لِلَّهِ. And I have the most taqwa of anybody for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when they try to do it on their own, without following the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told them, what? That's not my sunnah. مَنْ رَغَبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. Whoever feels they can find a better sunnah than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then he's not from me. So you want to be from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? You want to avail yourself of the light of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Then follow his sunnah. Can I merely follow his sunnah by reading books? I don't think so. What do I need to follow his sunnah? You need the rijalillah. You need people who are exemplars. People who are living, breathing examples and embodiments of the sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is something that will remain to the last day. Don't believe the people who say, oh, there's no more awliya, there's no more muttaqeen, the ummah is terrible. We are in such a bad state. It's so miserable. Nobody knows anything anymore. Look at the state of the world. Look at the state of these countries. Look at the state of this. I was in Istanbul last week, where our Shaykh studied. And I was teaching in a place called Markaz Effendi. Markaz Effendi, where the Mawlawiyya is. And that place is called there because the Shaykh, who lived centuries before that, was called Markaz Effendi. And you probably know from Urdu, Markaz means like the place of something or the center of something. How did he get this name? It is said that his teacher, his Shaykh before him, one day asked a question to 3 of his students. He said, if you can do anything, and you can change everything that you want, anything that you want, you have all of the money, all of the power, all of the influence, whatever it is, what would you change about the world? What would you do? One of them said, I would eliminate poverty. Well, why should everyone live in poverty? Let's fix that. I said, okay. Another one said, I would eliminate sickness and disease. Why should anyone get sick? Okay. Then he asked the Shaykh.
There's people listening at home. I think we've got to adjust this slightly for them.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. All right. Then he asked the Shaykh, what would you do? He said, أترك الأشياء في مراكزها. I would leave everything the way exactly it is. In its markaz. Why? Because that's the way Allah wants it. Who am I to come and change something the way that Allah put it exactly that way? Whatever is happening right now, is it something Allah doesn't want? Can we say that? Mustahil. Impossible. Impossible. Will always be impossible. Allah wants it exactly the way it is. Does that mean we sit back and just accept? No. Doesn't mean that. But don't ever think something's gone terribly wrong and somehow Allah, this thing happened. I can't even say it because it would be kalimat kufr. It's impossible. أترك الأشياء في مراكزها. I would leave things as they are. But at the same time, that height, that neighborhood where he was, here we are like 500 years later, we know his name. We know what he did. The effects of the students he taught, the knowledge he produced, the knowledge he transmitted, we're still benefiting from it. So certainly he didn't sit back and say, oh, that's everything's the way it is, let's leave it alone. No, he did, he worked. But he didn't lament. You do not want to be an ummah of lamentation. You know what it means to lament? Oh, it's so bad, what are we going to do? And complain. 30 years ago, wasn't like this. Yeah, you may vent to one another in this way. But the Prophet ﷺ said, من قال هلك الناس هو أهلكهم. And he also said in the Hadith al-Qudsi, لا تسبوا الدهر فأنا الدهر. Whoever says the people are destroyed, he is the one who destroyed them, or he is more destroyed than they are. And don't curse the time. Allah says, لا تسبوا الدهر فأنا الدهر. Don't curse the time, for Allah is the time. He is the creator of the time. He made the time. He made the years and the months and the days and the weeks and the minutes and the hours and the seconds. Did he not? He is the one who made the days of the week from Sunday through Friday. Did he not? He is the one who made the month, this blessed month of Muharram in the year 1445 that we just started. Did he not make that too? So then the job of the believer is then to be like the rain, like the ghawth. Spread wherever you may find it. Be a person of good, wherever it may fall upon. Like the great Ghawth Sayyid Abdul Qadir Jilani, which I know most of you know who that is. He was a student in Baghdad, and even his story is amazing. Orphaned young, sent by his mother to go study in Baghdad, and she gave him some money, and she said, tie it in your jubba like this underneath, so that no thieves can come in. So he's like 12 or 13 or something. And then he goes with the caravan, and the caravan is raided by a mob, a gang of thieves. And the gang of thieves take all the money from everybody. So one of the thieves, he comes to the young boy and said, what do you have? He said, I have all these gold dinars. They didn't believe him. It's impossible. Why would you have gold dinars? So then the head of the gang, Ra'is al-Islam, asked his gang members, what did you find? Well, we found this, but this boy says he has gold dinars. It's not true. He said, bring him to me. He said, do you have gold dinars? He says, yeah, my mom tied it for me right away. And sure enough, they found it. He said, why did you tell us that? You could have just said you don't have it. We never would have thought you have anything. Because he said, my mom told me not to lie. The man was astonished. فَتَابَ فِي الْحِينِ. He repented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that moment and gave everyone back what they were owed and vowed never to steal again. And he became from the Al-Abrar al-Salihin. And Sayyid Abdul Qadir Jilani continued on to Baghdad. But he saw a lot of what we see today. He saw debauchery and he saw people not praising Allah, people not reading the Quran, people not praying regularly. He said, I don't need this. Let me go worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala outside of the city. Let me roam the desert. Be far away from all of this distraction, all of this evil. So he made his way. And he goes. And he gets past the gates. Back then cities were walled. Right? Once you leave the city walls, come out, you're on your own. And he's outside. And then he hears a voice say to him, Ya Sidi Abdul Qadir, you have reached the highest pinnacle. You can do no wrong after this. He said, wait a minute. That's not right. I can make mistakes. I go by the Quran and Sunnah. I go by the Sharia. That's Shaitan saying that to me. Shaitan doesn't want me to go back there. He wants me to continue. And then he came to a realization and an inspiration that he needs to go back to Baghdad because he needs to be like the rain. He needs to spread the good and the khair to all of the people of Baghdad. And so he went back and he began teaching and healing to the degree that 10,000 people would attend his majlis. 10,000 at least. They didn't have a microphone like this back then. How can someone who's 100 rows back hear him? Back then they would have people who would repeat. So the person in the back of the room here would say what the Shaykh said and go back and forth. So by the time you got to the last person, maybe it's 5 minutes later than what he said it. And then they repeated. And they wrote everything down. And in the books that he wrote, like Al-Fath al-Bani, is from the dictation of the students of his oath. Sayyid Abdul Qadir Jilani. And Sayyid Abdul Qadir Jilani, if you read Al-Fath al-Bani, if you read the words, they're very simple. Very simple. He just told people, go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Go back to worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Go back to being good to one another. Go back to being accepting of Allah's decree. You have to have al-ilm bihkamillah wal-ilm billah. So the ilm, the knowledge of the legal rulings of Allah, you have to know how to pray and fast and zakah and all that. Amma al-ilm billah, how do I actually deal with my circumstances? How do I deal with setbacks? How do I deal with disappointment without losing faith, without losing hope, while maintaining my iman? This was a more specific type of knowledge that you couldn't get from reading the books. This type of knowledge you can get from one person transmitting to the next. From Rijalillah, from the Ghawth, from the Qud, from the Abdal, from the Jabal, passing from one to the next. And so, while the Ummah has preserved the Quran and the Sunnah in its textual form, so you have a library back here, and you have Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, alhamdulillah, it's not going to get lost. And obviously, nor is the Quran, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said He'll take care of that Himself. But this other type of knowledge that's transferred from one generation to the next, this will take more effort on our part. And that effort on our part is not just reading the Quran and Sunnah, it's walking and living and breathing the Quran and Sunnah, being an embodiment of the Quran and Sunnah, being Muhammadi, reflecting the light of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the nur of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and following his way, Siraj al-Munira. This was the greatest achievement of the Ummah, that we produced people like that. Because people like that built things like this, and created beautiful things, and created the Jama al-Umawi in Damascus, and Sultan Ahmed in Istanbul, Amr ibn al-As in Cairo, so forth. They created those things because they embodied those meanings. And they were meticulous, and they were detailed, and they were precise in what everything meant and what everything stood for. Nothing was extraneous, nothing was out of place. This is what one can see when we become and we produce these people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they knew their time. They knew the time that they were living in. Sayyid Abdul Qadir Jilani, he knew the time that he was living in. He knew the things that needed to be said. Not because he studied the people and had all of this, kind of data on people like we do today. It's a meaning Allah put in his heart. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just like our Prophet speaks, and he's not speaking of his own volition, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give that to the awliya. And they speak and they're not speaking of their own volition. Their words are embodying and indicating the Quran and the Sunnah, because Allah placed those meanings in their hearts. We have to do better than what we're doing now. We owe the generation of our young brother Farhan here and others like him, that they see that beauty, they see that mercy, they see that compassion, they see that love. Because I'm going to be honest with you, what we are facing now is very challenging. I'm not going to lament it and say, oh, wait a minute. Allah put us here. This is the time we're supposed to be in. And it's a challenging time, but also an exciting time. Because Allah will not put us in the situation unless we also have what we need to deal with it. مَا أَنزَلَ الدَّاءِ إِلَّا أَنزَلَ الدَّوَاءِ. He didn't send down the malady, the sickness, except He also sent down the remedy. So we have the remedy amongst us. All of the issues and the ideologies and the AI and the LGBTQ and all of these things that we're worried about for our children and worried about for our children's children and so forth, that's not the main issue. The main issue is, where are we in here? Where are we in our understanding? Where are we in providing wisdom, hikmah, and service, and khidmah, and mercy, and compassion? Because if we do those things, Allah will ease the way for us. If we invite to Allah by His permission, like the Prophet ﷺ. So don't speak of your own volition. Don't invite to an ideology, or to your shaykh, or to your way, or to your tariqah, or to your jama'ah. That's not what the Prophet ﷺ did. Invite to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can have a shaykh, you can have a tariqah, you can have a jama'ah, you can have an ideology. But that's not what we invite to. What we invite to, who we invite to, is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the most important thing we pass on to our children and to our children's children. We want to give them the Islam that is facilitated, that is easy to understand, that makes them feel alive and happy to be Muslim, not under burden, not under pressure, not feeling they will never measure up. The Prophet ﷺ, he gave the advice to the du'at. بشروا ولا تنفروا ويسروا ولا تعسروا. بشروا ولا تنفروا. يعني اشتغلوا بالبشارة. Make people optimistic. Right? Don't scare them all the time. ولا تنفروا. Right? We have a lot of tanfir today. And the Prophet ﷺ told us not to do that. Tanfir is to be offensive, to push away. Islam should never push away and should never be offensive. Anyone of a pure heart who finds what some Muslim says offensive, I would question the Muslim before I question the person who's not Muslim. Because if they have a good heart, nothing in Islam is offensive. Quite the opposite. It's all enlightening, it's all guiding. It's all hidayah, wa inayah, wa ri'ayah. That's Islam. وَيَسِّرُوا وَلَا تُعَسِّرُوا. And don't make things unduly difficult. If there's more than one way to do something, and one way be facilitated, choose the easier way. This is what Aisha said about the Prophet ﷺ. مَا خُيِّرَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم بَيْنَ أَمْرَيْنِ إِلَّا اخْتَارَ أَيْسَرَهُمَا مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ إِثْمًا. Prophet ﷺ was not presented two different ways to do something, except he chose the easier one, as long as it was not something wrong, like a sin. But if there's two ways to do it, then choose the easier way. We are not rewarded extra for choosing the hard way when the easier way is available. We are not rewarded for choosing the hard way when the easier way is available. We don't ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tests and trial and tribulation. Instead, He said, Sallallahu al-afiyah. Ask Allah al-afiyah. Right? Which is to be free from trial and tribulation. Do you need trial and tribulation and difficulty to be a good believer? No. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give you all the things that people pass those trials and tribulations. He can give it to you without you having to go through them. Is He not capable of that? فَسَأَلُ اللَّهَ الْعَافِيَةَ. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala الْعَافِيَةَ. عافني في بدني، عافني في جسدي، عافني في سمعي، عافني في بصري. Give me afiyah in my hearing, my seeing, my body, my spirit, my health. سأل الله العافية. نسأل الله العافية. الدائمة. For everyone, both in this life and the next life. Ask Allah for ease, ask Allah for facilitation, ask Allah for taysir. يا ميسر كل عسير يسر لنا كل عسير. All the difficulties that are presented for us, and you're the only one who can make them easy for us. So when we're thinking about transmitting, and not just preserving, but transmitting and making this deen thrive for the next generation, we have to know our next generation very well. And we have to know the challenges that they face. And we have to know there's going to come a time when we will not be there for them anymore. And they're going to have to do it on their own and figure it out. And not only that, they're going to have to do the same thing we're trying to do for them, for their children, and for their children's children. So we have to remove all things that don't belong to Islam. All things that are foreign to it, that come from our own insecurity, from our nufus, from our egos, from our misunderstandings. We want to present Islam as it is, not as we necessarily see it. We don't see it right. And make it beloved to them. Make it beloved to them. The way you present it, the way you do it, is as important, if not more important, than what you actually present. لا تصل إلى المعروف إلا بالمعروف. You cannot get to something good and pure except the means themselves have to be pure and good. And I'll give you an example that may be controversial, but I believe it. There used to be a time, and it used to work, we may say generations ago, when small children would be learning the Quran, memorizing the Quran, and maybe you could pull on their ear, you threaten them with a stick, and things like that. I don't think it's going to work anymore. I know people who've done it that way and they're traumatized by it. It doesn't work for our context, our time. It has to be by love, by mercy, by compassion. And certainly that wasn't the way it was done in the time of the Prophet. I challenge anyone, you bring me any hadith, any indication that the Prophet ﷺ used this type of threatening or punishment to have people memorize the Quran. Memorizing the Quran is a beautiful thing, and it's a wondrous thing, it's a wonderful thing. But more important is to live the Quran, is to live the meanings of the Quran. I'd rather have a little bit of Quran memorized, but living by the meanings of the Quran, and loving the Quran, and loving the Mosaad, and loving to read it, and loving to recite it, and to have a relationship with it every day, to pick it up and to look at it and think about the meanings, even a little bit every day. Why aren't we teaching our children that? Why can't we teach our children that? Why can't we teach our children to love everything about the Prophet? Why don't they know the way that he looked, the way that he walked, the way that his hand felt? Said Anas ibn Malik, he said, I never touched the hand of soft as the Prophet, even softer than silk. Why don't we teach our children that Anas ibn Malik, also the one who served the Prophet from when he was 10 years old, he said, never did I do something that the Prophet said, why did you do it like this? Or never did I neglect to do something. Did he say, why did you not do it the other way? And Khadim Nabi Sallallahu. And he loved him so much that he loved whatever the Prophet loved. He said the Prophet would look in the stew and he would like this thing called dubat, which is like a type of squash or gourd. So he said, I saw the Prophet looking for it, so I also look for it. I also love it. I also choose it. So that love that he had for the Prophet, even though it was based upon his recognition of the Prophet's love, it actually became the thing that he loved. He truly loved it in his heart. It transformed him. This is what the people who are the inheritors of the Prophet do, like the oath. They're like the rain. What does rain do when it falls upon the ground that's dry? It brings it back to life. Can you imagine if we had just a few people like that? Just to be in their presence, bring you back to life? Can you imagine if the Prophet was here and he just looked at you? Just glanced at you? Gave you a nod? Gave you salam? Can you imagine that? What would your life be like after that? You'd never be the same. You'd never be the same. Prophet would, some of the Sahaba would kiss the hand or be kissed on the hand. They don't want to wash their hands again. They don't want to wash their lips again because they touched the Prophet Muhammad. Sayyidah Aisha, after the Prophet passed away, and the Prophet passed away, he didn't have much. He wasn't concerned with the dunya. And Aisha said, the last thing remaining in the house was this kind of old piece of bread that was there at the same time with the Prophet. And I didn't want to eat it. I didn't want to eat it, but I was forced to eat it because there's nothing else in the house to eat. Because she wanted to keep that thing of the Prophet. Anything that would remind her, she wanted to keep it. Anas ibn Malik كان صاحب النعلين والمكحلة He is the one who kept the sandals of the Prophet and the mukhra, which is the kuhl well that he used to put antimony medicinally on his eyes or goes to sleep. And he had the burda of the Prophet. He said people would come to us, they would ask to see Sayyidina Ali, and then يطلبون الشفاء الاستشفاء بالبرده. They would come and say, just show us the burda, we want to wear it because it gives us healing. It gives us shifa. This is the Sahaba saying this, not some Sufi group 1,000 years later. The Sahaba would come, the Tabi'een would come saying, we need the shifa. Let us put the burda on. So even the effects, something he touched, something he wore, has the healing effect on the ummah. Can you imagine the healing effect on the ummah of the people of the Rijal, the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who embody that? And they still exist, they're still here. Don't, like I said, don't believe the people who say, no, it's all gone, it's whatever. It's done and it's finished and nothing remains. Everything remains. Everything remains. But the thing is, are we sincere enough for Allah to guide us to it? That's the question you ask. Not the question is, where are they? How can I find them? That's not the question you ask. Are you sincere enough that Allah will bring them to you? Because if you are, He will. If you are, He will. If you truly seek, if you truly want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you truly desire Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will not disappoint you. He will not disappoint you. So for our children, for Farhan and his friends and his brothers, we need to make these places places of healing, places of love, of mercy. That the moment you walk past that door over there, it's like you're in a different place. It's not the same place as outside. That's what the Muslim institutions were like. Don't you feel that? Haven't you, some of you been to Umrah and Hajj? Do you not feel it when you walk into the Haram in Mecca? Do you not feel it when you walk into the Haram in Medina? Do you not feel it when you pass by the Prophet ﷺ and give him salam? Is it not there? It is there. Why is it still there? Because the people of Allah are still there. And the people of Allah can be anywhere. They can be here in Aylesbury, they can be in Medina, they can be in Karachi, they can be in Delhi, they can be in Kabul, they can be anywhere. They can be in Kashmir. They're all there. Because as long as that meaning is in their heart, it will be there. And that's what Muslims did. These buildings were only meant as a beacon. That's a place whenever I can go find them. To direct me, like a beacon, like a lighthouse, on the shore of, where the ship has to travel and doesn't know where to find port.